start now. Right. Good evening, all, and welcome to the third day of Cheltenham on Horses for Courses, at least. It's a bit of a different panel tonight. It's just yours truly, William Tijani at KJV2, and we have Ethan Simlett making his debut. How are you, Ethan?
Very well, thank you. Looking forward to this.
Yes, indeed. It's a panel that is, as you'll know, quite short in quantity, but with Ethan, thanks, very high on quality. We'll get right into it, but first of all, thanks again to everybody who keeps listening and watching via YouTube. We are really pleased with the feedback we're getting, and also the viewership and listenership, so it makes it all worthwhile. So thank you very much for that. We'll start with the JLT 130, the first race. Ethan, this actually looks quite a good renewal, and there's a fair few places that one can go, but who's been on your mind for this race throughout the season?
Well, I will be honest, I am a big York Hill fan. Sure. Admittedly, his price is not all that appealing, and his jumping has been rather iffy. He was late last time out and over the fences, and then with his schooling, everyone I'm sure saw he was a bit careful at a couple when he clattered into one as well. He did get better as he went round on that schooling session. Actually, I think he's got a magnificent. I think if he stays up, he's certainly the one to beat, but of a head case. So you'd have to have reservations at 13 to 8, I think, backing him. But personally, I do like him. Punter-wise, I would probably, for value, the one I would look at. Good Leopardstown, beating our Duke. Maybe there's a question mark about looking back down to 2 mile 4. I think he may try and lead. I'd say at 11 to 2, he's probably the each way play. Don't think there's any value in top notch. He was impressed, but you probably want 4 to 1 or bigger on him. So yeah, I think Disco would be the play at the prices for me. How do you feel about it?
Okay. Yeah, I would agree that Disco is overpriced, I think. Well, maybe not overpriced anymore, but a solid selection still. And I like his chances of going really well in this. Actually, I can report that we have been joined by Stopwatch Racing for the third night in a row. Thank you very much, Stopwatch.
Evening, how's it going? Sorry I'm late, guys.
Good evening.
No worries at all. We're very happy to have you. I'll let Stopwatch talk about this JLT Novices Chase, and then I'll chime in at the end.
So winging this slightly because I don't have my figures to hand. The only horse I've backed in this is Disco, who I think at the prices rates the best bet. I mean, obviously York Hill's got an obvious chance. I've got him clocking the best speed figure of any of these. But you're looking at a horse who's likely to go off around even money on the day, possibly even shorter, depending on how the market shapes up. Disco last ran on Irish Gold Cup Day, the day that Size and John won the Irish Gold Cup, and in terms of his sheer time performance, he was vastly superior to that Irish Gold Cup on the clock. Now, clearly it's 4 or 5 furlongs less than that race, but I still thought it was a serious performance. I think the thing that marks him out as well is his jumping. He's a very, very slick jumper over a fence. Ironically enough, the horse to take out of Disco's win that day was our Duke of Jessica Harrington's, who one day is going to be an absolute monster. And I think if he gets his jumping together, he's a Gold Cup winner in waiting. But he's clearly not going to Cheltenham, and I think, I'm a Disco fan. I think he'll run a big race on the day, and I'm not sure what price you get at the moment. Maybe somebody can fill me in, but I certainly backed him around 12-1 a few weeks ago.
I think it's about 11-2 now.
Okay. Still, though, it's not a bad price. It's a fair price, a fair reflection of his chance, I would say.
Yeah, I agree completely.
I would add another voice of agreement with Disco. I felt frankly that he was very impressive last time. He seems to have come right back onto the boil in terms of his form and consistency, and he's now strung together, I think it's 2 very good efforts. So I'd hope he'd take that on a third time to Cheltenham. And I can finally see what Noel Mead was talking about. I can really see it. And I think that he's got a big chance. I love York Hill in terms of talent and in terms of being a horse to watch, definitely. But there is the worry that he can end up beating himself, and this is not a gimme race. To be fair, neither was last year's Neptune. But he seemed a more uncomplicated horse, even over hurdles, than he has been over fences. He will need them to go a good, strong gallop or to make it himself, and he seems awfully keen, awfully buzzy, and awfully unsettled. I think it'll be very hard for him to, just get in a nice rhythm and give himself the best chance of winning. And I think it's a job on for Ruby to unleash that talent. So I would go with Disco. I think he's got a big chance of bringing up to the favour anyway. The Pretemps is one of the most difficult races in the entire festival. I will go to Ethan to see if he's got any thoughts on this. I'll go to him first again, then stopwatch.
I've got 2 shortlisted. The first of which he has got a fairly big weight to carry, but he did win a Grade 2 novice chase last year. Hurdle, sorry. No. And he is quite a gutsy horse. I think the ground is winning the qualifier at Musselburgh over Arthur's Secret. Showed his guts and determination. And I think 10-1 is a fairly decent price for him. The other one who I like is Impulsive Star. He's got strong course form behind Holstone and Ami de Bois, to name a couple. Bit of West Approach in that race as well. He won very nicely in his qualifier. And I think 11 stone 4 is decent weight and he progressive for me. So 8-1, he would probably be my main play in the race.
Right, thank you very much. I know you don't have the time figures out, but have you got any thoughts on the Pretemps? Stopwatch.
I've not backed anything. I've not looked for the horse in great detail. One I would pick out for listeners, though, quite a generous price. I think you can get 25s, non-runner, no bet, is a horse of Nigel Twiston Davis's called Ballymalin. He took my eye on his penultimate start at Kempton, I think it was around mid-January, where he made all that day. He was carrying a double penalty, giving £10 away to horses like Alpha Male and Ben Eagles, I think are interesting horses in their own right. He led all the way and he just kept piling it on from the front. He's a bit paceless in terms of any sort of change of gear, but he keeps finding for pressure. He keeps galloping all the way to the line. And my instinct when I first watched him that day was that we were looking at a horse who probably 2 seasons in the line would be an ideal Grand National or Welsh Grand National type. He's a big sort. I think he'll jump a fence in time, although he's 7 years old already. And his speed figures, both X and Kempton, they've been very solid. And he's on a mark of 138. And I think the interesting thing is that Nigel's good at getting decent claimers into the yard. You've had people like Ryan Hatch, Tom Humphrey, Jamie Barbary over the years. And with Sam likely to be riding for his boss, i.e. Paul Nicholls, it wouldn't surprise me if you had one of his £5 claimers up on top of him. And I think he's the type who's likely to try and lead the whole way, which I just looking at this from a wider perspective, I quite like having a claimer on board for a horse who's very much point and shoot. For a horse necessarily quite a tactical ride, just somebody who can go out and lead and stretch them all out. And so if he was off an effective mark of 133, I could see him placing at an absolute minimum, and you can get, as I say, 25 to 1 at the moment. So I wouldn't put you off that each way. The only issue is the type of race that makers will be trying to lure you in with 5 places, 6 places, that kind of thing on the day. So whether he shortens significantly between now and then, I'm not too sure. There may be something to be said in waiting till the day. But I think 25s is fair, and I couldn't put you off having a little nibble at the moment. So that would be my angle into the race.
Okay. I heard Impulse the Star mentioned. I was there a Texter that same day. He won, and I was really quite taken with him. There, he appeared to idles a bit, so only ever gets away in the closing stages, but actually had a lot in hand. He's sure to get a run. Won't be too high, especially if the handicap is as compressed as it looks on the initial weights too. I'm sorry. And he's also still very progressive. He has good course and distance form. He also goes on good ground as well as soft, and there's not a lot really to crab him for. I think he'd have to be a rock solid each way bet. Of those coming over from Ireland, Isle of Hope and Dreams is another one I like. Actually becoming fairly attracted to him too. And he was really taking at Punchestown. Probably should have won actually at Leopardstown over Christmas too. So I think you'd struggle to go wrong with either of those two. We are on to one of the more competitive races of the week. It's the Ryanair Chase. It's typical because we have another favourite from Closotton, but this is not by any means a done deal. Not at all, is it? And I wonder what the clock tells you stopwatch racing.
I would say it's. I mean, again, I'm reluctant to say this kind of thing because you have people wheeling it out every year. I would say this is certainly one of the poorer Ryanairs we've seen in recent years in terms of strength and depth, at least. Which makes it slightly surprising in some respects that Andasso is still available at 3 to 1. I'm sure a few listeners were watching the final furlongs Cheltenham Preview night on Monday, and Tony Keenan, whose opinion I respect greatly, he's a very, very shrewd guy, said that he, looking at the race, felt that Andasso was more of a 7 to 4, 6 to 4 shot, and instinctively, I can kind of agree with him. Something I'd asked the panel, and I put this up on Twitter because there's a wee bit of a catch-22 here, I think, in that Andasso clearly handles soft ground very, very well. He'll handle soft ground better than almost anything else in this race. But at the same time, the big question mark with him is 2.5 miles at championship pace. Will he stay the trip? So I'm not absolutely convinced that if you're Willie Mullins and Ruby Walsh that you want soft ground, because clearly the softer the ground, the more stamina test. So I mean, I don't know what the other two guys think, but I would be more against him, I think, if there were to be a significant deluge of rain, even though he handles soft ground well, because I think it would be to his detriment stamina wise. I don't know what either of you two think about that.
Agree. I think 2 mile is his optimum, really. I think we'll probably get good to soft or good ground by Thursday. I think we'll probably be good to soft at the start of the festival. So I'd say potentially good by the time the Ryanair comes round. I think he should be shorter in the market than he is. Just about this strength and depth and the opposition. We look at it. Alexandra, good return in the Clarence House. 22 months off, I think. So he should appreciate the better ground that I expect, and obviously won it last. So he'd have to be a consideration.
I mean, he certainly shaped it. You would have to say he shaped better than Underso. That I mean, I think Underso was actually giving him weight. I think he was giving him £5 or. And no, in fact, I'm just looking at the form now. They were carrying level weights that day. You would have to say that Uxizondra, after nearly 2 years off, not being fully wound up, and the way he shaped that day, you would have to say, looking at it in pure form terms, he would be the one to take out of that race. It's whether do you guys believe in the so-called bounce factor?
That's my only consideration.
Yeah, it's my main worry too.
I've never quite understood the science behind that, but I mean, it is. I mean, people have done studies into it, and it is a factual thing. Horses are much more likely to underperform second time out on the back of a long layout, so you'd have to be slightly worried about that. I mean, I've managed to pull the elusive speed figures up on my laptop now. I mean, I've only got 3 horses rated 160 and above this season that are competing in this race, and they're the obvious 3: Underso, Empire of Dirt, and Uxizondra. I've got Underso £5 clear of either of these two. I think one horse who hasn't put in a particularly decent speed figure yet, but who is shaped like he'd be better suited by 2.5 is Allery, from the Colin Tizard yard, who has been confirmed as this being his likely target. Clearly wasn't right on his first start over here, and then he was going to be beaten by P4 2, I think, at Exeter. He jumped very, very well. Exeter is quite a tough jumping test. It's not a traditionally tough jumping test, but the way the fences, you approach the fences, can be quite tricky. And I was really impressed by how he jumped that day. And I'd actually backed T4 2, and I thought turning for home that Allery was gonna win easily. He obviously fell, although at that point T4 2, I think, had overtaken him. But it was only in the last kind of 3 furlongs or so that he started to weaken out of it. And I think if he were to get into a nice rhythm, he'd certainly look dangerous turning for home. Whether he actually sees out the trip is questionable. But it's important to remember that when he first came over here, that Colin Tizard worked him with Thistlecrack, and I think they were I think there were actually concerns in the stable that Thistlecrack might not have been quite right. Such was the quality with which Allery worked those kind of early days over here. So he's clearly got a serious engine, and just taking a look at Betfair, he's 30s at the moment. I think he's an interesting one. He could go off half that price on the day.
That's very, very interesting. just going to put in the word here for Empire of Dirt, and a big one too, because I think he's got a huge chance in this. Put simply, I can't think of a more progressive horse in racing, apart from maybe To Be Fair, who goes into Potemps earlier, in such a short space of time. He absolutely bolted up in the Coral Chase at Leopardstown, is the Grade A handicap chase at Leopardstown last year. He then went on to the Plate last year, and he bolted up by some 4 lengths from Tango de Juliet. It was off a mark of 142, but he just sauntered around and won as he liked. And then he did the same in the Troy Town, where the margin was 4 lengths, but really the distance could have been doubled or trebled had Ryan Cooper wanted it. And then he was a really good second in that. Start again?
I think it was just interference. I don't think anybody spoke.
Can I hear somebody?
Look, yeah, I think it was just there was some sort of interference there. I'm not sure anybody spoke.
Sorry about that, mid-flow. But he was then second in the Irish Gold Cup when the late deluge of rain was frankly just not to his aid. I think it was a bit softer than it would have been reported to be that day, and he did really well to push Sizing John quite close in what was a race run in a very decent time with some nice closing sections, I understand. But here, for a 3-mile Grade 1 chase, we know he handles the course and distance and likely ground. Probably won't be as quick as it was last year anyway. And that form with Sizing John, I think, is possibly the best form we've got here. And I really like his chance, given that so many of these listed in the betting aren't going to run to take him on. Sizing John goes to the Gold Cup, Duvan goes to the Champion Chase, Outlander goes to the Gold Cup, Vroom Vroom Mag and Jack Adam won't run. Then it's his stablemate, Sub Lieutenant, who I think is fair each way at 14s, having back to earlier in the season. But I think, yeah, Empire of Dirt's got a big chance of taking it up to Understow, and I think he will. This is likely to be run with Understow. Probably going to be winning pretty aggressively, I'd imagine.
Is that a given? Do we think? Do we think Ruby will try and get him settled in, maybe prominent but not leading? If I were Ruby, I would have him settled maybe 3rd or 4th, and try and switch him off a little bit. But maybe I mean, the issue with that, of course, is that his jumping probably isn't at its best when he's in and amongst horses. I mean, because Understow is not the best of jumpers anyway over a fence, and you would have to worry that if he went down the route of trying to switch him off and get him settled in, would his jumping go to pieces a bit? So again, it's an interesting bit of a catch-22. Do you get him jumping but use his stamina up, or do you forgo a bit of his jumping ability but try and get him switched off better and save something for the end?
I think I would like to see him ridden out and try and make it a bit of a for the others in behind. I think he does jump better when he's being ridden at a better gallop.
Cutting out there just a bit, Ethan, so gather your thoughts and try again. When you're ready, Ethan.
Are we down to 2 already?
Yeah, he had a couple of teething issues.
Can you hear me, Will?
Oh no, yeah. Yeah.
Right, 1 second, just need to make a little small edit.
Behind. I think he does jump better when. I think jumping ability, but I get off it and do something.
Okay, so Ethan, when you're ready to speak, give me 3, 2, 1.
I'm ready, mate.
All right, 3, 2, 1, go.
Yes, so I think Underso would be at the front of the pack, try and make it a speed test. I think that's when he's at his best. I think when he's in behind and at a slower pace, he is prone to making the odd mistake. And I think if he can really turn it into a bit of a strong gallop, then suit the likes of Empire of Dirt and Uxasandra.
Yeah.
I think that would be in his favour. So I'd be looking to go out the front.
Yeah, I think that's definitely. I mean, if you look at how Uxasandra did it, he was actually given a very inefficient ride in terms of the pace. You know, he went an absolutely bollocking gallop that day, but his jumping was so slick, and he was able to travel at that pace much more easily than the rest of the field. So that even though he was using up plenty of petrol early, the others in behind were all pushing away, shoving away, not really finding the rhythm, and that was finding them out in terms of their own race efficiencies as well. So there is actually, I think that's an interesting. I would say that's an interesting point from Ethan there about going hard enough early that everything else in behind is struggling to go with you.
Yeah, it is. One thing I would say also is with Underso, stamina is less of a problem for him now than it would have been a year ago or a season and a bit ago. When he won the Arc, it was a proper little tearaway, actually. I was quite surprised in most battle and finds so much to beat God's Own. But he's so much more tractable now.
Yeah.
Has won over a trip nearly equidistant to this at Toy, albeit yes over hurdles, but it came in ground with plenty cut, probably more than it would be Cheltenham New Course last weekend. And if we're talking about a well-run race too, we have to consider Uxasandra. AP McCoy drove him from the front when he won the Ryanair 2 years ago. I don't see what the benefit would be of him restraining Uxasandra again. Definitely not. And I think we could see the principals taking a fairly aggressive stance, at least. Another reason why I like Empire of Dirt, I think he's got it.
Written to pick up the pieces.
Anyway, we all happy with our discussion of Ryanair?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to add to what you're saying about Empire of Dirt, I mean, I think he's rock solid. I've got him down as being the second best speed figure on offer here. Two things I would say as well. One is that Gordon Elliott at various preview nights has basically said that if he were to run in the Gold Cup, he would have Gordon Elliott's best chance of winning that particular race. So when you consider that you've got Don Poley and Outlander, both of whom are rock solid 165 horses, that in itself is a bit of a tip here. The other thing I would say is if you're interested in backing Empire of Dirt, I would instinctively hold off until the day, because I think Underso is going to be the subject of a really big market move the night before, the morning of the Ryanair, and I can genuinely see him going off 5-4, 6-4 on the day, which means I think at an absolute minimum you'll get 4-1, 9-2 each way on Empire of Dirt, and who knows, the morning of the race, with Underso being backed, you might get some bookmakers looking to push him out to 6-1. At which point, if you can get 3 or 4 places, quarter of the odds each way, you know, you're starting to talk about a brilliant each way bet there. So I would just hold off in backing him now and hold your nerve and wait till the day of the race.
I agree entirely. So I think we'll go off 6-4, definitely.
Right, thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. Now for the biggie of day 3, the World Hurdle. What a fantastically competitive race this is. So many angles at which to approach this. To you first, then we'll get the times, and then we'll.
You're cutting off a little bit there, Will.
My apologies. But yes, a very competitive race. I think it's best we head off to Ethan first, then we head off back to you for some times and general thoughts, because I'm sure we'll have a lot to discuss.
I think it's best that we start with Harry. You'd be very hard pressed to back against him. I think 11 to 10 is fairly generous. In fact, I think he should probably be 6 to 5 on, really, based on what he's done this season. Of course, form around Cheltenham. Can't really knock him in any way, shape, or form. The one thing I will say is that I think in November, Newbury, I think very close, if not beaten him that day. But for falling 2 or 3 out, he was travelling, I think, even stronger than Harry was. So I think he may be a decent play at 14 to 1. But the one I really like is James Hill at 7 to 1. And over Snow Falcon and Condor Warrior last race. And before that, he fell at the last at Leopardstown when he was running another big race. Green Mag possibly would have had the beating of him that day, but nonetheless, it was looking like he was never going to be out of the first 3 at least. He's got the form around Cheltenham, second in Supreme, second in A last year. For me, he's the play each way at 7 to 1.
Thanks very much for that. Stopwatch, what did the time say about Harry? And are any other horses standing out on the clock for you?
So, I mean, if you look at, Harry, and I've talked a little bit about this on Twitter, he is clear in terms of speed ratings this season. I've clocked him at 167, and I've got nothing within £9 of that. So from that perspective, you would instinctively, you think, as Ethan was saying, that he should perhaps be an odds-on shot. And I wouldn't disagree with that. He's another horse who, if you're in a position to look at a race just on gut instinct and your feel of a race, he would appear to be an odds-on poke. The issue that I have with him, and the reason that I haven't got involved with him and I won't get involved with him at the price, is that he isn't an outstanding horse in terms of, if you look at things historically. So I've got him at 167. I rated Thistlecrack last year 180 plus on World Hurdle Day. I rated Alpha de Zobo in the mid 170s. Big Bucks I rated in the mid 170s. Even Cole Harden 2 years ago now, it would be, I thought clocked a 165 performance. So what I'm trying to get at here is that he is not an outstanding horse by any means. He's simply a very, very good, consistent, decent horse in what looks a bad year. In all likelihood, he'll win. But I try and price up a race. When I look at a race, I'll try and price it up, and I just can't find any juice in his price around the kind of even money 11 to 10, 5 to 4 mark. I'll point out a few bigger odds. Ballyoptic, I think, has been a shade disappointing this season, but at the same time, he's actually put in some fairly eye-catching performances, often falling before the line. I think it was two starts ago, he was narrowly ahead of Harry at Ascot, just before Christmas time when he fell at the last. It was very tight that day, and even if he wouldn't have beaten, you know what I mean, Harry, he would have been within probably 2 or 3 lengths, and that alone, a repeat of that, would see him in the first 3, and he's currently available at 18s on Betfair. You can probably get something like 14 to 1 each way with a bookmaker. I think he's rock solid. I think if he gets round, he'll be in the 3. And I've got him down as my third best horse in terms of speed figures this season. And had he stood up at Ascot, he might have even clocked a better one than that. Other 2 I'll mention, Jeski, again, he's more of an instinctive one for me. Both of his performances this year, he's clocked speed figures of about 150. I wrote quite extensively about his comeback run over 2 miles, which was it Goran or Naas, or one of these places over in Ireland. The reason I was very taken with him that day wasn't because he clocked a big speed figure, but it was based on what I know about the horse from past experience, which is that he's another 2-miler, not dissimilar to Yanworth, who travels very well at pace, battles very well to the line, but actually lacks a change of gear. He has no turn of foot at all. So that day, I think it was at Gowran, they went no pace whatsoever, and yet he still showed the best turn of foot to beat horses, albeit horses in the 140s kind of mark, which over 2 miles, now that he's 9, I thought was pretty indicative of the fact that he's retained most of his ability. He's a very safe jumper, and I think if you're looking at a horse who'll be travelling as well or better than anything with 2 or 3 furlongs to go, it's Jeski. The issue is, of course, 3 miles at championship pace at Cheltenham, you're probably going to find a horse who can crack him. So, for example, a Cole Harden, I can't see Cole Harden winning this, but he's a tough bastard out front. He'll jump, he'll make a proper bloody test, and he'll just keep piling on the whole way, all the way up the straight. And if you're on Jeski, you'd always be worried that he's just not going to find quite as much as some of the others up that hill. So I'd be happy to leave him alone at the prices, but I think he's an interesting one nonetheless. The only bet I've actually had in the race, and I think he's a tremendous price at the moment, is Little Rockefeller, who is currently 55s on Betfair. I've no idea what you can get with a bookmaker. I mean, maybe 25s or 33 to 1 if they're feeling generous. He's been priced up, I think, on what was a very disappointing run last time out, where he should have, on All Known Form 1, it was actually found out after the race that he was sick. I think he'd done some sort of damage to his leg. But if you strike a line through that run and work off the basis that he was well below form that day, he actually has a clear chance on my speed figures. I've rated him around 160 for his performance behind Yanworth back. I think it was in around November time. That was a very, very good performance that day. It was at Ascot over 2.5, and actually Little Rockefeller was giving £4 to Yanworth. And again, Little Rockefeller is a thoroughly likeable horse. He'll be up in the vanguard the whole way. He finds plenty for pressure. He often finds 1 too good, and he'll probably find 1 or 2 too good here. But at 55s, given the speed figure I've clocked for him, given he's being aimed at the race, and given it's a weak year, I think there are much worse bets than having a few quid on him.
I would have liked to see him have another run, I think. He was meant to run in the Spirit Hurdle at Fontwell, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, and I think they weren't happy with him that day, which is a concern, although it's factored in at the prices at 55s.
Yeah, sure. I just would have liked to see him have one more run before going, but at the time I get the prices.
I think that's a fair point. That was a very long-winded explanation, guys. Sorry, I realised I was going on a bit there.
All right, no, thank you very much. Really concise, in-depth preview, which is what we like, what we have you for. I'm coming to the opinion that this is a fine each way race. There are many horses who have really strong place claims. Earlier in the season, I did opt for Valley Optic, who I felt was who I felt ran a really good race in the long walk hurdle at Ascot. Then was I think made to run far too fast in the Cleve hurdle. I'm hopeful he can run a half decent race, especially given River Mag won't run, the new one won't run, Jessica might run. It's a might possibly at best. I have to say, I think Cole Harding could just be ground based each way bet. If it's good ground and it's a solid surface, you might struggle to kick him out of the frame. Shanes Hill was gutsy in victory in the Galmoy hurdle last time. Only thing is he'd be badly in with Snow Falcon, who is also interesting at 16s. And I think you could do worse than have a couple each way against the field. One of which I'd say would be Cole Harding if you had good ground, and it has to be genuinely good for that to take place. If not, potentially even Snow Falcon. Long home straight, he was travelling really well when he came down in the long distance hub that You Know What I Mean Harry won so well. And this will be a competitive world hurdle, but some of those listed in the front of betting just won't run. About 3 of them are going to up. It's now onto the plates, the Bristol Plate, the Brown Advisory, and Marybelle Chase. Diamond King has quickly become one of the best backed handicapped horses of the festival. Ethan, do you share the same optimism?
Not really, no. Opposable at 6-1 in a field where you're going to have, 20? I think his jumping's been questionable at times. If he can sort that player in it, but 6-1 does not jump out to me as an appealing price at all. It's behind Coney Island in the Drimmore. Was decent enough form, you have to say, and 11 lengths behind Bells Hill. I know Bells Hill has had its trouble since, but I still rate him highly. 7 lengths behind him on Boxing Day at Limerick. I think good graded form. Just probably want another couple of points bigger on him if I was looking to back him. The one I have down is Village Vic. He's weighted horse in the race, or if not very close to it. But he's got strong the form. Yeah, he ran an okay race, and he ran well in some Grade 3 races this winter behind Tarquin de Saul and Frodon, just to name but a couple. Johnson on board is obviously a big bonus in my eyes. I think 12-1, you're probably going to get 4 places for a solid each way bet. I would be siding with Village Vic in this.
Is that you done, Ethan?
I think so. I'm struggling to find anything else really that's taking my fancy in this race, to be honest with you.
Indeed. Have you had a look at this race, Stopwatch?
Yeah, I have actually. I've not looked at it in depth, but I've backed a horse, and I've got a horse who I actually fancy quite strongly. A word on Diamond King. I mean, I quite like, and I'm all for people looking for plot horses and interesting angles into a race. But Diamond King on form's a 40-1 shot, and there are people out there and people like Rory Delargy who are very shrewd people at spotting horses who have maybe not performed up to their best, and they find it an interesting way to approach a race. But he's the kind of horse you'd like to back at 25-1, 20-1 on known form, hoping that he'd be quietly campaigned. I mean, at 5 or 6 to 1, he may well win, but you can let them win at that price. I mean, backing a horse at 5 to 1, a week out from the festival, with form like that is probably the quickest known way to the poorhouse. So I think you can safely ignore him. And if he wins, he wins. You can let him win at that price. The one I've backed, and I think is a very good bet at the prices, and also at the rather nice weight he's been allocated, is Baranalco of Gary Moores. He's run 5 times, I think, over fences this season, and every time I've clocked him running to a speed figure which is better than his bare form. Most noticeably when second behind Whisper back in December, but also, I mean, beating when he was second behind Top Notch at Sandown. I mean, every time he's run, I've had him running to around a mark of about 150, and he's been allocated a mark of, I think, 146, which means he'll have a racing weight around 10 stone 10 or so. I would assume that Jamie Moore will take the ride. He knows the horse very well. The issue with the horse, he's quite small. He's not actually like Top Notch, in that he's not a natural chasing type. He's very compact. He's nimble. He's very quick. He's equally at home over 2 miles as he is at 2.5. But he's very quick over a fence as well. I can see him leading, provided that Village Vic doesn't go, or at least pushing the pace, provided that Village Vic doesn't go off at 100 miles an hour. But I think he's the type to get into a nice rhythm, get them all at it round the home bend, and probably find 1 or 2 well handicapped sorts too good. But he's rock solid on speed figures. He's 12 to 1. He's going for the race as far as I know, and he's a rock solid bet in the race, and he's well handicapped. And just to make a wider point again, I think there's too much made of plot horses and horses who've been quietly campaigned. I think if you look for form that's rock solid with good time to back it up, then you're not going to go far wrong in backing horses at the festival or anywhere else. And yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think Village Vic's a very fair bet at the prices, and likewise, I think Baranalco is too. And you're talking about 2 horses who, honest as days long, have been honestly campaigned. And to be honest, I'd rather see a horse of that nature win a race like that than the Diamond Kings of this world, where Gordon Elliott's Gordon Elliott's keeping the handbrake on until Cheltenham. To me, it's clearly something he can do. He's within his rights to do it, but it doesn't quite sit right with me. So Baranalco at 12 to 1, and I think it would be a just victory if he were to win.
Lovely summary. I think Baranalco's got a big chance too. It's a shame that Shantu Village isn't going to go. I like his chances quite a lot. I wonder if Ball Dark will be sent here. If so, I think he'd actually be very interesting. This trip, hopefully with some decent ground. He's been really quite impressive the last twice, albeit he won a 1-horse race last time. However, it seems to be one of those that I think you just have to one day or after the declarations, really.
Yeah, I would agree at this point. I can't see many of these horses going off. I mean, maybe there'll be an almighty gamble on Diamond King and they'll go off 3-1, but not many of these are going to go off all that much shorter than they are at the moment.
I would agree. I would agree with that. Now let's get the Troll House Mares Novices Hurdle. The Troll House Stud Mares Novices Hurdle, registered as the Dawn Run 2, and it has been one of the most interesting races of the festival. If that who's going to run and who's going to be favourite has been thrown up in the air, and then down again, and then thrown up in the air again. Ethan, tired of this war, won't they, aren't we?
We certainly are. This is probably the toughest races out of all of them to weigh up purely on that. Obviously, Let's Dance punted massively, but then yesterday or today, Willie comes out and said the making of her. I agree with him. I think it's the Neptune. Obviously, she's got this 50,000 win bonus for the stable staff that need to consider using where they're sending her. On the base mares novice race does look like the easiest race for her. 2 mile or 4 or further even is best. If I was Richard to the next, there are other factors impacting on where she will go, so it'll be very hard to beat if she does turn up in this race. It's short enough considering the distance I have over her. Early Beach, you saw a big drift on from one-time favourite, 4-1 possibly, 9-2. Not sure off the top of my head. Won the Royal Bond at Fairy House in good style. However, Saturnus and Peace News have not really done much for the form since. Forge Meadow has held it up a little bit during stuff the last time out in Nats, but I think she's one I have in mind is La Bagarra for Warren Great Tricks. Good win at Newbury in November. If I was there that day, beating Dusky Legend and Copper K. I was a big fan, liked another run. I always like a horse to run within sort of 2 months of the festival, ideally. But I think Great Tricks has purposely given her time off. He's happy with how she's conditioned and strengthened over the winter. I thought in a much better position. Pass judgment on her. I know he's a big fan, and I think at 6-1, she's probably one of the best each way. So at this moment in time, that is where my money would be going. A word for Astoria is an each way a bet as well. While at home, you would have to be slightly concerned. Hurdling, she has fallen on the last 2 times, but she probably would have won at Fairy House last time, jumping the last. Shattered Love has won both the races that she's fallen. She's got decent form. Beat Forge Meadow actually at Fairy House, and has been behind Let's Dance and Early Beach in the past. So I'll be going to get the first 2 in the market with La Bagarra and Astoria.
Right, thank you very much. Would like to know Mr. Stopwatch, which one of the two favourites has earned maybe your respect or put up the fastest time? I have a feeling it'd be Let's Dance, but I want to know what you thought of Airlie Beach's win in the Royal Bond, because I thought it was superb.
Yeah.
Appreciated.
Yeah, I think it's important to start and to actually congratulate the good people of Cheltenham on the quality of this race, because I know when it was announced 18 months ago or so, a lot of people made a bit of a face, and based on the quality of the race last year, they were quite right to do so, because the race last year that Limini won was a farce, to say the least. I'm pretty sure, and I can't be certain on this, but Thistlecrack ran quicker, 2 miles quicker in his race, despite the extra mile, than Limini did to win the Mayor's Novices last year. But to be fair, they've come a long way since then, and you've actually got a race this year that's actually, it's quite a good race, quite an exciting race, and you've got some quality horses here. To answer your question, or perhaps to not answer your question, I've been almost equally impressed with both Airlie Beach and Let's Dance. I've clocked Airlie Beach at 148 on my speed figures, and I've clocked Let's Dance at 145, which is basically within a margin of error. I think they're both superb horses, and I think whichever one turns up here, I think will win the race. Simple as that. Clearly, the vibes from the Mullins camp in the last few days have been that Let's Dance is more likely to go for the Neptune. I think that's a very good decision. I think she's better over the 2.5 than she would be here. And on known form, at least, I think Airlie Beach would beat her over this kind of trip at Cheltenham. And I actually made that point earlier in the week on Twitter, where I couldn't believe that Paddy Power were offering 9-2 non-runner no better in Airlie Beach. I thought that was one of the each way bets of the week. The slight concern is, and then Kevin Blake and a few other Irish journalists pointed this out, that Mullins' open day at Closutton, the vibes were all for Let's Dance, and the vibes surrounding Airlie Beach were not good at all. I think the quote that Kevin gave was he just picked up no vibe off Willie Mullins whatsoever about Airlie Beach, which is a concern to some degree. Rory Delargy on Twitter actually pointed out, though, that if you were to take Mullins at his word on horses who weren't perhaps working well, then you certainly wouldn't have backed Vautour or Annie Power, both of whom won easily last year at Cheltenham. So I wouldn't be too concerned by that. And I think with Let's Dance looking increasingly likely to go Neptune, I think Airlie Beach, who you can get not non-runner no bet, but just win only at just over 3-1 on Betfair, is a very, very good price. I think if Let's Dance doesn't turn up, she'll go off 5-4, something like that, and I think she'll win. And I think she'll win pretty cozily. If you want, I mean, I would agree that Labago is an interesting one. I'm not a big fan of horses being given mid-season breaks the way she was by Warren Greytrex, but she put up fair speed figures, particularly on her most recent start. I've clocked her at 130 plus. And he is very, very keen on her. I mean, he put her down as his best chance of the week, and he thinks she could be something quite special. I think she'll run well. I just can't have her beating either Airlie Beach or Let's Dance on my figures. The one I'll throw up at a good price, who you can get at 60s on Betfair, I'm not sure what you can get non-runner no bet, is Barra. I think it's a Gordon Elliott trained horse.
Yeah.
She was disappointing last time behind Bacardi. She ran 5th that day. I was expecting her to be a good deal closer, although she's shaped quite well. Her penultimate start, though, at Fairyhouse, she clocked a very good speed figure that I've rated about 135, which I've got clear third using my ratings. I mean, I don't think she'd be good enough to beat Early Beach or Let's Dance, but assuming that one of those she doesn't turn up, I think she's got a very good each way chance. I'm not sure what you'd be able to get on Betfair to be placed. Probably not particularly great, but I think she's overpriced at 60s at the moment. And this is horse racing after all. Anything could go wrong. You know, assuming that Early Beach lines up and Let's Dance doesn't. If she were to fall at the third last, I would say Barra would have as good a chance as anything of getting over the line. So 60s, I think she's a bet.
All right, really lovely overview there. I'm going to be a bit more blunt and a lot less specific. I think that if Let's Dance goes to something like the Neptune, for which I think should be a huge contender, Early Beach is going to take a huge amount of beating. She was really, really impressive when she beats the Turnus. Even the form actually of her victory over Shattered Love is working out really well. So Turnus then went and beat Brelad 2 lengths in that grade, won the future champions Novice Hurdle at Christmas. Now I know Turnus was awful in the Deloitte, but he had a problem pretty sure, and through Brelad, that form's looking very good.
And it's actually, I'll hop in, sorry to interrupt briefly as well. That performance in front of Brelad that day is, along with Neon Wolf, the best novice hurdle speed figure I've got of the entire year. I thought Saturnus put up a 150. I think I clocked it at 152 that day. That was a monstrous performance that he put up that day. So I think I would totally agree. Back up what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I might, still back her even to beat Let's Dance, based at least on sort of the prices that you're getting. I think that's very much something worth thinking about and a bit worth having. For that, Labagal Roy, I think should go nicely. Quite know about Asturia just yet. Would have liked her to have completed last twice. And Shattered Love is a very solid horse, but on a marker through even, let's say, Forge Meadow, or let's say, a couple of the other horses you've been meeting lately, she's still got a little bit to find. And it's worth noting Ellie Beach beat Forge Meadow by 20 lengths last time 2 met. So that's something there to consider. 2, if it came up soft for Colin's sister, interesting, but it had to come up soft. There'd have to be a lot of give in the ground, definitely. Of the others, I would keep an eye, just an eye potentially. Khalid Lass, who was picked in at the deep end behind Midnight Jazz and Vroom Vroom Mag. I know Vroom Vroom Mag was ill afterwards, but she didn't disgrace herself there, and she could run a more than decent race. Anyway, this is a race for the amateurs. Thoughts caught the eye?
Nothing particularly. The one I have singled out is Southfield Royale. I think on bare form out of everything, his is the best. 4th in the 4 miler last year behind Native River. The comeback run at Doncaster, he never really got into the swing of things. He hit the first 2, just didn't seem to enjoy himself after that. He's been dropped £6 for that. In fact, pretty competitive weight now. 11-8, and I think based on that, he is a good play at 10-1, especially if he can replicate any of that 4-miler form from last year. The other one, lower weight, who should possibly just sneak in, it's Premier Bond, supposedly in pretty good form at home. Should squeeze in off 137, I think it is. He's won his last Pastor and Catterick, and 16-1. So I think those would be my two picks for the race, but South definitely the one for me in the finale that day.
Okay, Stopwatch, do you have anything on your mind for Kimura?
That time of the day, the only thing I'll have in my mind is pints and and then after that, the form guide for the next day. I usually watch Cheltenham myself, but I'm actually on the Thursday this year going over to a house with a few guys I know, which is unusual for me. So I think by that time in the day, I won't be in a fit state to be wagering anything, which is just as well, because I mean, I've just taken a look through it now. There is nothing here that I can get excited about, particularly, and the few that have piqued an interest in me are more likely to be going for the Ultima or races like that. If I were to give anybody advice in these kind of races, it's follow the jockeys, and you'll never go too far wrong backing what people like Derek O'Connor, Patrick Mullins, and Jamie Caudle ride. So my advice is wait till the jocked up stage, and then start to drill down the race from there based on who the kind of top 5 or 6 amateur jockeys riding are.
Okay. I will say for this race, look at who really strong contenders at the head of the market. If they just turn up, I really would like single farm payments chance in this. I'd love the chances of Henry Parry Morgan. Had been going really well last season. He's got form that ties in with Native River and Manila Rocco, let's not forget. He's an Exeter, but still, he's a horse whose last winning mark was 135, but clearly I think he is 150 horse and fairly treated off that. The Crafty Butcher. Now, he did take a fall last time, but the Paddy Power chase, so I think it's always a well-contested race. And if just a couple of those actually end up turning up, like him or say Maldini, who is really well treated, I still think, and I think he wouldn't go far, and it might be a little bit obvious, but Maldini's rating of 143 over fences, I think, frankly, is a little bit generous. The fact potential of 143 over hurdles. So I'm going to go with, to be honest with you, the Irish have a decent record in this as well. I don't think you've steered too far wrong if you went for one foot over the border. Anyway, that brings us to the end of the day 3 preview for Horses for Courses. Apologies for the technical difficulties we've had tonight. Certainly not the fault of our wonderful guests. Thanks so much to Ethan and the time we're having you on, lads.
Thank you.
No, it's been good. I've had to wing it slightly, but that always gets the blood flowing a little bit.
Indeed it does. We'll be back tomorrow, hopefully with a fuller, healthier panel. But again, don't blame it on the guests. Last thing, we need a lucky 15 for bets.
Right.
One, you can get 2 each actually, 2 each for in the day for lucky 15. So give us some selections. I'll start with you, Ethan.
Okay, with Southfield Royale in the last. And put me on the spot, Will. Undersow in the Ryanair.
Okay, and start.
I'll take Baron Alco in the Brown Advisory and Disco in the GLT.
Lovely stuff. I think that's 4, which you can do for the 15. If I had to throw one in there, I'd probably do maybe Cole Harding each way in the World Herd or something like that. Thanks so much for your time and your patience, and we'll see you again for the very last podcast before the festival that comes tomorrow. We might be actually recording possibly on Friday. We don't know for certain. Thanks so much. Keep in touch and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, and you, Will.
Thanks again, guys.
Right, okay, I stopped the recording. That will need a fair bit of editing. Not your fault, don't worry.
You're still live, Will, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Not many people watch to the end of this, so all the SoundCloud that we put into the Google Hangouts are wonderful, and I hope people are enjoying it. But let's have a look at who's with us. 2 watching now, so thank you very much for those 2 of you who are watching. I'm pretty sure you can cease and desist. That's the winner, 1-0 up.